UFOs are now hauntingly familiar. They have shared our skies for an uneasy 50 years. Eyewitness accounts testify to their breathtaking speed, unparalleled maneuverability, and uncanny silence. They are different than any aircraft made here on Earth. These stealthy visitors are called UFOs, unidentified flying objects. They have shown up unexpectedly in photographs taken all across the globe. Yet if we turn back the pages of history, there are intriguing hints that UFOs have been with us all along. Perhaps even as far back as 12,000 years ago, when our ancestors found shelter in the darkness of caves. The walls of these primitive dwellings were often painted with figures of hunters and the animals they hoped to snare. Recently, other images have come to light. These tracings were made from caves in France and Spain, and they show pictures not ordinarily associated with hunting.
Starting off our list today with probably the most obvious evidence of extraterrestrial beings having landed on Earth and sharing with us their infinite wisdom. The pyramids, obviously. I mean, have you seen those things? Not only are they impressive size-wise, they're also mathematical marvels. I mean, how the hell could ancient civilizations have created a pyramid, the Great Pyramid of Giza, aligned with true north within 3/60ths of a degree, making it one of the most accurately aligned structures on the planet that encodes its own latitude and longitude, with the base perimeter equal to 1/2 of its latitude. Not only that, but the pyramids of Giza's plateau are positioned to represent and align with the constellation Orion's belt. There are many other coincidences, like the pyramids being in line with Stonehenge and the connection between the information found in both the Egyptian and Mayan pyramids, along with the fact that all around the world they all look generally the same, despite being across oceans from one another. I'm just saying, to build all of the ancient pyramids now would be incredibly difficult, and without electricity, motor vehicles, and communication with fellow builders to confirm building shapes, sizes, and purpose, as well as what is written within them, I feel like it's impossible that we could achieve now what they did back then, probably because back then they had some help from some pretty smart extraterrestrial beings. I'm talking about aliens.
So back in 2017, a number of strange mummies were uncovered in a cave in Peru. Now these are not those small doll-like mummies you're probably thinking of. These are a different set of mummies. Apparently there have been some pretty interesting tests done on these as well. The mummies only have 3 fingers and have elongated skulls. A bunch of the scientific community said this was likely a hoax, that the mummies were likely tampered with, but it turns out that may not be the case. They did some imaging tests on one of the mummies named Maria, and the tests revealed that her bones are similar to human bones but have some distinct differences. First of all, there were no signs that her elongated skull had been artificially altered. Maria didn't have any hair or ears, she only had ear canal openings. Each finger has 4 bones, unlike the 3 bones in a human finger, making her hands about 8 inches longer than usual. Her feet have longer toes, each with 4 bones instead of 3. The heel bone of her foot is shaped differently, and radiocarbon dating places the age between 240 AD and 383 AD, meaning she lived around the time of the ancient Nazca civilization. Who knows if this is genuinely a real set of mummies or just a hoax? We'll probably find out within the next, I don't know, few months, weeks, days or so, but interesting for now.
Next up, we have some pretty convincing evidence. Ancient descriptions of spaceships carved within the walls of the Temple of Osiris at Abydos. I mean, the hieroglyphics are clear as day. While some people claim that the spaceship depiction is the result of erosion on the tablet where it had once been inscribed, I'm just not buying it. I mean, I understand there is a piece missing from the corner, but the spaceship image remains untouched and, in my opinion, unaffected. I mean, look at the other hieroglyphics on this slab. Although this is one of the only places in Egypt where spacecrafts are depicted in hieroglyphics, even this single depiction, combined with everything I mentioned in my first point, along with the fact that ancient Egyptians are often depicted looking up into the heavens and worshipping the stars, I'd say it's a pretty good chance that the inscription was more than just erosion or even abstract art. It's a spaceship, guys. Come on, just look at it.
Next up, we have some recently declassified UAP footage. The video was captured back in 2018, but was just released to the public this month, which at the time of filming this video is June of 2024. The strange object had been spotted flying over a US Joint Operations Base in Iraq, and the Pentagon has officially classified it as an unknown aerial phenomenon, or a UAP. The object was spotted and tracked by a US military infrared radar. It moved through the sensitive military installation before making a controlled descent into a body of water, where it stayed for about 17 minutes, and it re-emerged before taking off at an incredible speed. Something very interesting that a number of viewers have pointed out is how rapidly the object changes color. Remember, the video was picked up through an infrared camera, so the changing of color indicates a change in temperature. And apparently this strange object was rapidly changing temperature, which not only made it hard for the camera to track it, but it was also changing temperature faster than any known object, according to Dr. Matthew Sadagas, a physics professor at the University of Albany. So yeah, one of the most interesting pieces of UAP footage to come out in the last year or so.
Next up, we have Jonah and the Whale, a biblical story about a man who is cast from his ship and then swallowed whole by a great fish. For 3 days, Jonah lives inside the whale, and for 3 days he prays to God until eventually, voila, the whale spits him out. In some versions of the story, Jonah also notices that the ribs of the whale are gleaming bronze. One small fact that might just change everything. It's not uncommon for extraterrestrial believers to attribute instances in the Bible to alien activity, and so it makes sense why many UFO enthusiasts believe that Jonah was not swallowed by a whale, but instead picked up by an alien submarine, a USO if you will, unidentified submersible object with a bronze interior, of course. Fancy.
In May of 2023, a 911 call was made by a man saying he and his family saw something, quote, not human in their backyard. Last year in Las Vegas, a resident named Angel Kenmore called 911 after seeing what he described as a tall, skinny alien creature with greenish color about 8 to 10 feet tall, hiding behind a forklift in his backyard. He said, I looked at it in the eyes and my body just froze like having sleep paralysis. He described the creature as having a, quote, weird looking face, big feet, and big shiny eyes and a big mouth, and added, I can hear its loud, deep breathing, and its stomach kept moving. He would just stare at me, and seconds later, I could move again. Scott Roeder from Evidence Room, Animation and Exhibits analyzed video taken at the scene using motion tracking software. He said, quote, all of our results came back as authentic. There's no editing. That is an original video. Roeder scrutinized the footage repeatedly, and using motion tracking software, he showed how a shadow's movement seemed to match the movement of a body attached to a head, saying, quote, we don't believe it's a floating head, we believe it's attached to a body, and the motion of that head from right to left is consistent with the motion that we see between the slats of the fence. This one's kind of interesting. It is hard to make out what is going on in this video. I see the fence, I see everyone in the backyard. There is a bit of a shadowy thing above the fence, but it's hard to spot. Anyway, interesting story, and the police do say it doesn't seem like the family's doing a hoax.
Next up, we have Pakal the Great's tomb, located inside of a highly advanced pyramid in Mexico, halfway across the world from the Great Pyramid of Giza in Egypt, and intricately adorned with inscriptions that appear to depict a highly advanced space rocket. When Pakal the Great passed, he was placed inside a coffin, which was placed inside of a tomb, which was built inside of a temple. Also inside the temple, as I previously mentioned, inscriptions, many inscriptions, but one in particular that I want to focus on, this one. Yes, the one that appears to show Pakal the Great himself sitting in the driver's seat of some kind of highly advanced rocket ship with dials and gears and perhaps even weaponry, suggesting not only alien presence but also discourse among the extraterrestrial races as well. Which also begs the question, did Pakal really die, or is his tomb a monument to his bravery for joining some kind of space war? I mean, I know they found bones in his supposed coffin, but like, those could be anyone's.
Retired Army Colonel Carl Nell just came out with a very interesting statement, saying that non-human intelligence not only exists, but has been interacting with humanity for a long time. He shared this during a live chat at the Salt Eye Connections conference, which focuses on innovative ideas in finance and geopolitics. Now, at one time, Nell was the head of the Pentagon's UFO/UAP task force and says that the government has been withholding top secret information on aliens. According to Nell, the term non-human intelligence is used by officials to describe potential alien life. The Pentagon has of course denied these allegations. When asked why the government would keep all this stuff secret, Nell basically explained that the government just doesn't have much of a plan in place to deal with them right now and that they don't want to cause any panic, which definitely makes some sense, but hey. What do you guys think of this one though? Interesting? Just some kind of distraction? Who knows? Leave your thoughts down in the comments.
You want to know what makes me quite confident that my subtle belief in aliens having already touched down on Earth might just be 100% correct? Harvard scientists backing my claims. Yep, that's right. Here's some new evidence for you. Aliens have visited Earth because Harvard said so. Yep, Harvard, one of the top universities in the world, has academics running around holding press conferences and saying that not only is it likely that aliens exist and have been here before, but that they are probably still here, living either among us, below us, or even on the moon. The claim comes from a hypothesis pertaining to a study called the Extraterrestrial hypothesis, a case for scientific openness to a concealed earthly explanation for unidentified anomalous phenomenon. That's a mouthful. And the hypothesis itself provided 4 possible explanations for anomalous activity. 1 is an extraterrestrial explanation, i.e. aliens. 3, an unconventional terrestrial explanation, i.e. unconventional explanations that still don't involve aliens. And 4, the cryptoterrestrial hypothesis, the result of either aliens or a subspecies of humans that evolved separately from us to be far more advanced, living among us on Earth. It sounds pretty out there, but it's also Harvard University academics who wrote the paper, so who am I to judge? And who are you to judge me? It's Harvard.
And finally, we have some information that is going to be revealed next month at a conference by MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network. They're set to make what's being described as a major reveal about a case involving unidentified aerial phenomena, materials from Russia. The event will take place on Saturday, July 13th, so hopefully we'll be able to share some interesting news around then. All we know right now is that apparently mysterious materials were delivered to the home of a Russian UFO investigator. Tests, which were later confirmed by MUFON's US lab, showed that the materials are of unknown origin. Materials can usually be identified based on their components from the periodic table, but that was not the case here. Apparently 90% of the sample couldn't be identified. MUFON Media Relations Director Ron James stated that, quote, "The evidence that supports this story and others that we will share at the symposium could make this the biggest UFO-related news event of the year. We have physical materials and more evidence of non-human technology." So, something to look forward to.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have organic material. In an anonymous video, there was a point that was made about something that we are actually now watching happen in real time, and that is the mission to Mars for the Perseverance rover that is currently there digging around in the soil. The video stated that Mars may hold signs of an ancient environment that may have been favorable to microbial life. Well, that is exactly true, and the reason the rover is there at all. While Mars' thin atmosphere is unable to shield that planet from the high amounts of radiation coming from space now, it is thought that the atmosphere did once act as a better shield, and that the environment of Mars may have once been a great host for life, which is exactly why this mission is so important. This is all interesting because when this anonymous video was first released, it was still years away from the Perseverance mission actually taking place. But now, just a few months ago in September of 2022, there was a huge announcement made in this search for alien life. Recently, the rover has been searching at the site of an ancient river delta, trying to find any clues that might give us insight into the past lives of the planet, and that is when it made its most important discovery so far. A few recently collected samples have been confirmed to include organic matter. This means that the Jezero crater, which likely was once the home to a lake that the delta emptied into, well, it would have potentially potentially had a habitable environment about 3.5 billion years ago. These organic molecules are supremely important because they represent the building blocks of life, like carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And while this discovery doesn't just flat out confirm the past existence of life on the planet, it is one of the strongest clues we've ever received, which is absolutely unbelievable. In our number 9 spot today, we have the planetary system. In an anonymous video, whoever the person is speaking, they draw attention to a nearby star called TRAPPIST-1. The video didn't go too much into detail about this, but I'm here to do that now, so we can all know what they're talking about. While TRAPPIST-1 is a star, the revelation that the video spoke about was that this star has an entire solar system of Earth-like planets. This discovery first came in 2017, and upon further research in 2018, it was revealed that some of the planets just may harbor even more water than Earth does. Some of the planets are a little too close to the star, so the water is more atmospheric water vapor. The ones in the middle have liquid water like us, and the furthest ones have ice. TRAPPIST-1 is now the most thoroughly known planetary system apart from ours, which is kinda cool. While the anonymous video made it seem like there was a full-blown advanced alien civilization living in this solar system, there still might be potential for some form of microbial life that we just haven't quite found yet, and that is very cool. You know, we gotta start somewhere. Microbial life first, little green dudes next. In our number 8 spot today, we have cyanobacteria. For around 2 decades, Dr. Richard Hoover has been studying meteorites that were found in Antarctica, and in 2011 he claimed that he and his team had found evidence of ancient bacteria from colonies that thrived on comets, moons, and other planets. The astrobiologist said that they were able to make this discovery through the use of the most advanced microscanning technology in the entire world. Dr. Hoover sliced open these meteorites and discovered what they call the remains of cyanobacteria, also known as blue-green algae. This type of algae is said to have a unique quality and the ability to thrive even in some of the harshest conditions, which is necessary when talking about surviving the extreme environment some other planets hold, as well as just space in general. Dr. Hoover said that while some of the bacteria he had found was similar to those on Earth, he said that some of the others were completely alien. He said, quote, "Neither I nor other experts who have seen the evidence have any idea what these creatures might be. I believe these findings indicate that life is not restricted to Earth, but is broadly distributed even outside our solar system." In our number 7 spot today, we have the FBI documents. One self-proclaimed member of Anonymous took to the internet to discuss some important FBI documents that are apparently unclassified, just sitting there on the website waiting for people to take a look at their contents. The video claims that the document suggests that we've not only been visited by aliens from space, but also beings from other dimensions. The video does explain that the document didn't originate from within the FBI and rather from a university head, but that the FBI treated the document with the utmost importance, which is certainly interesting. It is also very important to note, however, that this document was sent in 1947. Not sure if that makes the claims more or less likely or credible, but the timing of it definitely seems important, at least to me. While this is one of the things that you have to draw your own conclusions from, in the video it is mentioned that while we are arguing whether or not supposed UFO or alien sightings have really taken place here on Earth or in space, there are real instances of extraterrestrial beings visiting us, but we're just too focused on the debate to open our eyes and see for ourselves. In our number 6 spot today, we have the light shifts. In the latter half of 2015, a Penn State astronomer named Jason Wright explained that there were pretty erratic and spontaneous shifts in the light that was coming from a newly discovered star. The star sits about 1,280 light years away from us on Earth, and these shifts were very similar to as if something was passing in front of our view of the star briefly before passing through. Scientists weren't able to connect this to any exoplanets or anything like that, which we could understand, and this is what led Jason to quite an interesting theory. He stated that it is possible that the shifts are caused by massive objects passing in front of the star in a kind of orbit, like an array of massive satellites or a similar kind of structure, like the type of thing that could be produced by an intelligent and civilized life form. Again, like many things, it's just a theory, but a very compelling one at that. In our number 5 spot today, we have the 2023 sighting. The sign of alien life is in the form of a video, and this video was taken very recently on January 22nd this year, 2023. The video was posted to Reddit by a user called MaxKeller96, and with the video they gave some context. Quote, "My sister, dad, dad and I were out hiking near Picket Post when one of us noticed something glimmering near the mountain, so we stopped to look at it. All I could really make out is that it was a small bright dot in the sky. After a good 15 seconds of staring at it just silently hanging in the air trying to figure out WTF it was, I started recording. Sorry it's shaky AF, I could barely see my phone screen and was trying to get a good look at it with my own eyes. It then dropped 2 flare-looking things, though my sister swears she counted at least 3, and then it instantly sped off, heading southish. Up until that point, I thought it might have been a helicopter or a drone, as there's a lot of military Air Force base stuff out here, but there is no effing way anything can accelerate that fast. We all lost sight of it nearly instantly after the video cuts, and we were all properly freaked the F out about it. I've replayed the video probably 100 times and tried showing it to everyone I know, and no one had any idea what it could be other than a super high-end drone. If you think you know, please let me know. After watching the video also probably 100 times, I can definitely say that I had no idea what they saw that day, because I also really don't think it's a drone. Also, I just have to say that this video even gathered people together on Reddit. And that's no easy feat. Redditors are ruthless and often very skeptical, and still people are pretty on board and confused over what this could have been. In our number 4 spot today, we have the etheric planet. There is a claim that not only have we been visited by some sort of extraterrestrial beings, but that these beings that have apparently been visiting us are coming not from a planet as we think of it, but rather some sort of etheric planet that interpenetrates with our own, but we're just unable to perceive. Apparently, if you're a student of esoteric matters, these concepts will make a lot more sense to you, or so this anonymous video claims. These alien beings are apparently able to make a conscious decision to enter our plane, and in that same respect, they are able to make a decision to disappear from our view. They are visiting us as they are thinking about settling here on our plane, and that they are coming here peacefully. During these visits, they are also said to have technology that would destroy any sort of attack made on them, so it is advised that if they make themselves visible to us, we do not attack or make them feel threatened. I'm not so sure about this one, but at the end of the day, I am certainly no student of esoteric matters, so maybe it's just something that my brain cannot comprehend with the knowledge I currently have, you know? I'm on one plane, I gotta get on another level. In our number 3 spot today, we have the witness testimony. Speaking of alien visits, another person that Anonymous pointed out as a good source to listen to was a man named Dr. Brian O'Leary, who is a former NASA astronaut and Princeton physics professor. Apparently, he stated that there is abundant evidence that we are being contacted, that civilizations have been monitoring us for a very long time, and that their appearance is bizarre from any type of traditional, materialistic, Western point of view. He also apparently said that these visitors use the technologies of consciousness, they use droids, they use co-rotating magnetic discs for their propulsion systems, which seems to be a common denominator of the UFO phenomenon. I obviously have no idea how I could possibly substantiate these claims, but they certainly are interesting regardless of what you personally believe. This could, of course, just be nonsense in order to stir up the masses, but it could also be someone who's finally telling us all the truth, but maybe we're just a little too skeptical to listen. In our number 2 spot today, we have Enceladus. This small moon is often referenced when people begin to discuss the possibilities of alien life, and for fair reason. It was discovered that this moon has hydrothermal processes going on underneath its crust. To us non-scientists, that means next to nothing, but what if I said that that means that it just might have all of the requirements for life, and that it is becoming a greater possibility that we might actually find microbial life there. Basically, this moon has an icy shell for a surface and then a rocky interior, but between these 2 layers is a warm ocean, and this ocean is where scientists think life is most likely to be. This discovery came almost accidentally when the Cassini orbiter arrived to Saturn in 2005, and it found water plumes shooting out of the cracks in the surface of the moon, which made scientists realize that it just may be geologically active. Through more research, and by flying the orbiter through the water, by the time 2015 rolled around, scientists knew that it was holding all of the keys to life. While this moon was never the original focus of research, it quickly took over with its very exciting potential. In our number 1 spot today we have the Venus cloud. A couple years ago in September of 2020, astrobiologists everywhere were excited and skeptical of some new potential evidence that had been found in the upper clouds of Venus. The new findings were pointing to the potential of the presence of phosphine in these clouds. Phosphine is a rare and usually poisonous gas that on Earth is basically always met with the presence of living organisms. Venus hasn't really been the top of the list of choices for finding potential life due to its surface temperature and pressure and the sulfuric acid clouds, but this evidence could prove to say something otherwise. 2 separate telescopes were able to pick up the signatures of phosphine in a cloud that had a similar temperature and pressure to Earth, and while this isn't concrete evidence of space bugs, it will at least be a reminder that we should be continuing to look for life even in the most unlikely places. And hey, maybe it is space bugs. I don't know.
Number 10. Triangle object. The Defense Department has confirmed that leaked photos and videos of an unidentified aerial phenomenon taken in 2019 are indeed legitimate images of unexplained objects. Photos and videos of triangle-shaped objects blinking and moving through the clouds were taken by Navy personnel, Pentagon spokeswoman Sue Go said in a statement to CNN. She also confirmed that photos of 3 unidentified flying objects, one spear-shaped, another acorn-shaped, and one characterized as a metallic blimp, were also taken by Navy personnel. As we have said before, to maintain operation security and to avoid disclosing information that may be useful to potential adversaries, DoD does not discuss publicly the details of either the observations or the examinations of reported incursions into our training ranges or designated airspace, including those incursions initially designed as UAP, she said. She also said that the Identified Aerial Phenomena Task Force, created to investigate UFO sightings observed by the military, has included these incidents in their ongoing examinations. Number 9. Drone footage. On April 19, 2023, the Pentagon released another video featuring MQ-9 drone footage from the Middle East depicting a UAP. In the footage dated July 12, 2022, which the US Defense Department shared online, the US military's MQ-9 Reaper drone somewhere in the Middle East, exactly where wasn't disclosed, can be seen monitoring a strange metallic silver orb-like object flying around below it at some seemingly high speeds while the drone's camera tries to follow it. This footage is significant because while there have been previously declassified US military footage of UFOs, those were all taken by pilots in manned aircrafts. This one, however, was taken by a drone. However, this isn't the only time this particular UFO has been seen. Apparently, there has been many other sightings of a strange metallic orb in the Middle East. Sean M. Kirkpatrick, director of the Pentagon's All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, told a Senate Armed Services subcommittee that it resembled a small metallic orb. He added there isn't an explanation for, but the reason for is due to lack of available data. It is going to be virtually impossible to fully identify that just based on that video, he said, according to ABC News. Number 8. ADAR. The Pentagon's new Office for Investigating Potential UFO Sightings received hundreds of news reports in 2022, and while it can explain more than half of these events, a sizable chunk remains a mystery. Within the new batch of sightings, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office and the Office of Director of National Intelligence say they're focusing on some 171 cases, including some in which objects appear to have demonstrated unusual flight characteristics or performance capabilities and require further analysis. Since it was formed last summer, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office has received 366 reports of UAP. That total reflects 247 new UAP reports and another 119 that occurred before March 2021 but hadn't been included in the earlier report. The new numbers indicate a steep rise in UAP sightings. Now, the report released in June 2021 lists just 144 reports covering a 17-year period. With the subsequent additions, 510 UAP reports were in their files at the end of August 2022. Officials say they believe the rise in UAP reports is due to the US government's effort to destigmatize the topic of UAP and instead recognize the potential risks the phenomenon poses, both with aviation hazard and potential advisable activity, such as foreign surveillance efforts. Number 7. Dancing lights. On January 29, 2023, Canadian air traffic controllers and pilots couldn't identify 2 white lights moving in a circular pattern reported over Canada's Northwest Territories. Good evening, just wondering, do you got 2 planes that are just to the east of your field doing circuits or maneuvers? A crew member aboard a Canadian North flight headed to Yellowknife asked air traffic controllers. Negative, I have no reported traffic in the area. The Yellowknife air traffic controller replied, do you have a visual on something? The crew responded somewhat hesitantly, Army, yeah, we're looking at two lights dancing around here to the east of your field. They're above us about I don't know what. We're not seeing them on the TCAS, traffic collision avoidance system, but we can see lights moving around. Then there's a pause before the crew member on the radio back say, "We're not crazy. No, we believe you," the air traffic controller replies, and the sighting remains unexplained. Number 6. Over New Mexico. On February 21st, 2021, a pilot flying over New Mexico at the altitude of 37,000 feet reported seeing a long cylindrical object that almost looked like a cruise missile type thing moving really fast over the top of them, according to published audio. American Airlines confirmed that the radio transmission came from flight 2292. The FAA a few days later stated, a pilot reported seeing an object over New Mexico shortly after noon local time on Sunday, February 21st, 2021. FAA air traffic controllers did not see any objects in the area of their radar scopes. Seems like air traffic can never see these objects, but the pilots can, and I can't tell if that's better or worse. Number 5. The Coyne incident. At 7:30 p.m. on October 18th, 1973, American Airlines Flight 21 encountered a UFO near Mansfield, Ohio, and reported it. This would be the first of dozens of sightings reported in that area that night. However, the most astonishing one took place 3 hours later and became known as the Coyne incident. Sometime after 10:30 p.m., an Army Reserve helicopter piloted by Captain Lawrence Coyne and a crew of 3 men was flying from Columbus to Cleveland when somewhere around Mansfield they noticed a red light on the horizon. They then realized that the object was heading straight for them at a high rate of speed. Coyne quickly descended to avoid collision, but as the men were preparing for impact, the object came to a halt in front of them and projected a green pyramid-shaped beam over the helicopter. At the same time this was happening, the men reported the helicopter being pulled up towards the UFO. However, it then let go and darted out of sight. The incident lasted 5 minutes. The men described a gray metallic-looking dome-shaped object with a red light on one end and white light on the other. Now, interestingly, after the incident, according to one crew member, the helicopter never worked right again. Now, this whole incident was seen from the ground by a mother and her 2 children who pulled their car over to watch what was going on. They reported seeing the helicopter chasing an object they said looked like a blimp, pear-shaped and as big as a school bus. Number 4. Trumbull County UFO incident. Featured on the History Channel and numerous UFO documentaries, the Trumbull County UFO incident in northeast Ohio is exceptional because it was witnessed by numerous police officers and a 911 dispatcher, all of whom were being recorded as they spoke back and forth about the strange events unfolding on the evening of December 14th, 1994. It was also seen by many members of the public as well. Now, around midnight, Trumbull County 911 began receiving calls from residents about a strange low-flying light in the sky. The dispatcher sent out Liberty Township police officers to investigate, and one of them was Sergeant Toby Maloro, who saw a light. He got out of his car and looked up to see what he described as a giant circular-shaped object and intensely bright in the center section. It made no sound at all, and the object was there for about 30 seconds before moving away. Shaken, the sergeant decided to chase the object, as did many other police officers in the area. In total, at least 14 law enforcement officers saw the object at night, with all of them discussing it openly on their radios. Number 3. Navy pilots. Recently, 2 former Navy pilots were interviewed by 60 Minutes on CBS News about a UFO sighting over the Pacific Ocean in 2004. Commander Dave Fravor and Lieutenant Commander Alex Dietrich spotted the unidentified object during a training exercise but were unable to classify it. Dave described it as a little white tic-tac looking object, adding that it lacked conventional exhaust plumes and had no wings or visible markings. It also moved erratically, the pilot said. In an interview with NBC News, Dave described the 2004 encounter, calling the object the strangest, most obscure thing I've ever seen flying. As soon as we look down, we see the white water, and then we see this white tic-tac. It's pointing north-south, and it's just going forward, back, left, right, he said, adding that it was bouncing around like a ping pong ball. Dave said he approached the mysterious object to take a closer look, and it began mirroring his movements. Then when the pilot got within half a mile of the UFO, it suddenly vanished. My question is, what was he going to do if he got closer? This whole story is just crazy. Number 2. Multiple objects in the sky. Ryan Graves, a former Navy pilot who testified that he witnessed UAP with his own eyes, has called on President Joe Biden to investigate the mysterious object spotted in American airspace. Ryan, a former fighter pilot, explained that after 2014, when upgrades were made to our radar system, our squadron made a startling discovery. There were unknown objects in our airspace, and these were not mere balloons like the Chinese spy balloon that dominated the country's attention in February. These were no mere balloons, they could hold their position, appearing motionless, despite Category 4 4 hurricane force winds of 120 knots. They did not have any visible means of lift or control surfaces, in other words, nothing that resembled normal aircraft with wings, flaps, or engines. These are not isolated incidents, Ryan said. We have a real UFO problem, and it's not balloons. The point is that we don't have a clear understanding of what's above our heads as we thought we did. There are uncertainties up there that we have to deal with. If we don't do it, our adversaries are going to take advantage of that uncertainty, that weakness, to spy on us with various means, as we've seen. It's pretty clear. If there are things over our head and we're not sure what they are, well, we need to figure it out. If they're adverse role, it's a national security issue, we have mechanisms for that. If it's not a national security issue, then it's not an adversable platform, then it's a matter for scientific inquiry. Now, I'm not gonna lie, this scares me a little bit. And coming in at number 1 is leaked video. A leaked Navy video captured in July 2019 showed a sphere-shaped unidentified object flying over water near San Diego. The footage, obtained by a documentary filmmaker and shared with NBC News, appeared to show a mysterious object flying for a few minutes before disappearing into the water. The video was captured by a Navy aircraft and recorded in the USS Amsa Combat Information Center, according to the filmmaker Jeremy Corbell. The clip appears to show a spherical object flying above the water for a few minutes near San Diego before it vanishes. It splashed, military personnel can be heard saying in the video. The Defense Department confirmed that the clip was recorded by Navy personnel and said it will be reviewed by the Pentagon's Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon Task Force, a panel established last year to gain insight into the nature and origins of such objects.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have Levelland. This incident took place in 1957 in Levelland, Texas, and actually was the inspiration for a scene in the film Close Encounters of the Third Kind. In the real-life incident, dozens of citizens from across the city began individually reporting seeing a rocket or a strange set of lights or some sort of unidentified object, but that wasn't it. Whatever these citizens were seeing was also reportedly interfering with their vehicles as well. Engines were suddenly just dying out and lights were cutting out. If this happened to just 1 or 2, this could have been some kind of a weird coincidence, but it was way too many instances. Something else had to have been at play. The authorities at first thought that the reports were a hoax until they too saw the strange lights as they began to investigate. This is where Project Blue Book came in and they started to investigate, and they came up with quite the conclusion. They claimed that whatever had happened here was simply just a case of an electrical storm and ball lightning that caused the lights and the mechanical malfunctions. That's super reasonable, but the catch with this explanation is that there were no reported storms or thunderstorms or rain in the area that night at all. I'm just saying, something here clearly isn't adding up quite right. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Belgium wave. Near the ending of November of 1989, citizens of Belgium were shocked to report seeing a big triangular UFO hovering in the sky. Aside from these reports from the visual witnesses, however, there wasn't any physical evidence supporting the existence of the UFO. Flash forward to a few months later in March of 1990, however, and new sightings began to pop up, but this time their presence was being confirmed by 2 military ground radar stations. Here's where things get really strange though. 2 F-16 fighter jets were sent out to investigate what the hell was going on, and this is when the pilots found that they couldn't see anything visually, but their radars were able to spot the target. While trying to keep track of these objects, the UFOs were moving way too fast, and the pilots ended up losing track of them. In the end, there were about 13,500 people who witnessed this UFO incident, which has made it one of the most widely experienced UFO sightings of the modern era. The Belgian Air Force has no idea what it was that they had witnessed, but they thankfully did acknowledge that some sort of unknown activity had taken place instead of just trying to sweep it under the rug and pretend like nothing ever happened. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Chicago UFO. This UFO sighting comes from November 7th, 2006, and it was at the O'Hare International Airport in Chicago. Flight 446 was getting ready to head to North Carolina when an employee from United Airlines that was on the tarmac noticed a dark gray metallic aircraft hovering over one of the gates. After this, 11 other employees and even a few people who didn't work there saw this gray saucer floating at around 4:15 p.m. The people who saw it explained that it hovered above the gate for about 5 minutes before it just shot itself upwards and broke through the clouds, leaving a hole in the clouds where you could see the blue sky through. The strangest thing, however, is that this flying saucer did not show up on the radar. The Federal Aviation Administration just called it a weather phenomena and would not investigate it, despite there being around 15 witnesses who all saw the same thing. This story, however, became the most read story on the Chicago Tribune's website and even went international national, because it certainly is very interesting. I also think at an airport they just want to, investigate strange occurrences, you would hope. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Lubbock incident. On August 25th, 1951, in Lubbock, Texas, a group of scientists from Texas Technical College were all hanging out in the backyard of geology professor Dr. W.I. Robinson. They were all just chilling, enjoying each other's company, until around 9:20 p.m. when they saw something strange. It was a V-shaped formation of 15 to 30 bluish-green lights that were passing overhead. They were completely confused over what it could be, but figured that the lights would likely reappear, which they did. About an hour later, the lights reappeared, and at this point, all of the scientists knew that they had witnessed something exceptionally interesting. But what was it? The scientists weren't the only ones to witness the lights either. About 350 miles away in Albuquerque, New Mexico, an employee of the Atomic Energy Commission's top secret Sandia Corporation, who had a high-level Q security clearance, had been sitting outside with his wife, quote, gazing at the night sky, commenting on how beautiful it was, when both of them were startled at the sight of a huge airplane flying swiftly and silently over their home. On the aft edge of the wings, there were 6 to 8 pairs of soft, glowing bluish lights. There were more sightings as well, all reporting a very similar thing. The group of scientists began investigating, tracking the lights, which they witnessed 12 more times. They measured the angle of the lights, they tracked the speed, and they attempted, unsuccessfully, to try and measure the UFO's altitude. Here's the deal with this though. The government did end up coming to investigate, but the official explanation for these lights is the most cryptic message I've ever seen. It read, quote, I thought that the professor's lights might have been some kind of birds reflecting the light from mercury vapor streetlights, but I was wrong. They weren't birds, they weren't refracted light, but they weren't spaceships. The lights that the professors saw have been positively identified as a very commonplace and easily explainable natural phenomenon. I can't divulge exactly the way the answer was found, because it is an interesting story of how a scientist set up complete instrumentation to track down the lights. Telling the story would lead to his identity, and in exchange for his story, I promised the man complete anonymity. Despite people claiming that this mystery has been solved, by this explanation, people are left with a lot more questions than answers. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Foo Fighters. On a late November evening in 1944, nearing the end of the Second World War, Lieutenant Fred Ringwald was riding as observer in a night fighter that was being piloted by Lieutenant Edge Luter with Lieutenant Donald J. Myers on radar. The men were in the Rhine Valley, which sits north of Strasbourg on the French and German border, when Lieutenant Ringwald saw something. He said, quote, I wonder what those lights are over there in the hill. When the rest turned to look, they saw 8 to 10 fiery orange glowing lights. They checked with the ground radar, but nothing was registering. The men thought that there was a chance that these lights could be some kind of air weapon, so they turned themselves to be ready to fight, only to have the lights suddenly vanish. The 3 men who experienced the strange lights at first didn't tell anyone about what they saw because they feared being ostracized by those around them. This all changed, however, when stories of similar sightings began to spread through their unit. As it would turn out, many other pilots and flight crews experienced these same orange glowing lights, and one pilot even experienced a strange cigar-shaped flying object. In this instance, the UFO was described as, quote, a wingless cigar-shaped object glowing red just a few yards off the plane's wingtip. Lieutenant Krasny, justifiably spooked, instructed the pilot to attempt evasive maneuvers, but the glowing object stayed right next to the jet for several minutes before it flew off and disappeared. Throughout the years, the explanations for what these people saw have ranged from things like combat fatigue to the works of Nazi astrophysicists, so at this point, what exactly happened here remains quite a mystery. In our number 5 spot today, we have the Big Flap. Back in 1952, while the panic over flying saucers was real, there was a bunch of strange reports of potential UFO sightings over the skies of Washington, D.C. These sightings later became known as the Big Flap, and they were being reported by civilians as well as military radar operators and pilots. In fact, there were so many people reporting these UFOs that a special intelligence unit of the US Air Force was sent in to investigate. What really sparked a lot of concern with these sightings is when radar operators at National watched the objects fly past the White House and the Capitol building. This is when 2 F-94 interceptor jets were sent to investigate, but both times as they approached the mysterious objects showing on their radar screens, they would just suddenly disappear. In the end, as a result of the investigation, what they found, or really the lack of what they found, combined with the official explanation information that was released only worked to fuel some early conspiracy theories that the government was working to hide the evidence that proves the existence of alien life. In our number 4 spot today, we have the disappearance. Frederick Valentich was an Australian pilot who disappeared under some unbelievably suspicious circumstances on a training flight on October 21st, 1978. During the flight, he radioed the Melbourne Air Traffic Control to let them know that he was being accompanied by an aircraft that was about 1,000 feet above him, and at the same time that his engine had begun to run roughly. Air Traffic Control responded to him by explaining that there was no known air traffic at that level, and Frederick explained that he could see a large unknown aircraft with 4 bright landing lights. He explained the aircraft approached him from the east and at first thought it was another pilot playing around with him. For the record, during a flight seems like a terrible time for someone to play a prank. He then went on to explain that the mysterious aircraft was orbiting him and had a green light on it. When Air Traffic Control tried to get further details and asked what kind of aircraft it was, Frederick responded by saying, "It's not an aircraft." After this, his radio transmission was interrupted by a metallic scraping sound, and this is when all contact was lost. Sea and air search began, but to no avail. There have been speculations that don't involve alien abductions, such as a staged disappearance, the possibility of Frederick getting confused and flying upside down, and potentially even him taking his own life. All of these theories have been debunked in some sort of way, and neither the aircraft or Frederick himself have ever been found. The reason why alien abduction has been the main theory in this case is due to the fact that many reported UFO sightings came on the same night in the same region as his disappearance. It of course leaves us with more questions than answers, but it is all very interesting and very mysterious. In our number 3 spot today, we have Apollo 11. We can sit here on Earth all day and talk about the potential for alien life, talk about UFO sightings, but who would know more than people who have actually been to space, which are of course astronauts. Definitely on the list of coolest and scariest jobs in the entire world, there haven't been a ton of people who have had the unbelievable privilege of experiencing space firsthand, but there are even less of them who have claimed to see something that seems completely unexplainable. People who have claimed these sort of things include Edgar Mitchell, Catherine Coleman, and Dr. Brian O'Leary. The very interesting part about many of these claims is that they also include some sort of government cover-up as well. There was also Buzz Aldrin, who spoke about his Apollo 11 experience, and he detailed the crew seeing something flying alongside them, and at first they believed it was the final stage of a detached rocket, but then Mission Control confirmed that it was actually 6,000 miles away from them, leaving them with no answers on what the flying object could be. I can't imagine going to space at all, let alone encountering a UFO flying right beside you. In our number 2 spot today, we have the FBI documents. In a video that was released by the hacktivist group Anonymous a few years ago, they discussed some sort of FBI documents that are apparently declassified and just sitting on the website waiting for anyone to come across. These documents apparently suggested that we not only have been visited by aliens, but also by beings from other dimensions. This document was sent in 1947, and while it didn't originate from within the FBI, it was sent in by a university department head, and it was treated with the utmost importance by the FBI. The document goes on to say that the aliens that have visited aren't from a planet as we think of it, but rather some sort of etheric planet that interpenetrates with our own, but we just aren't able to perceive it. They're able to consciously make the decision to enter our plane, and in the same respect, exit it whenever they want. The document says that all visits are peaceful, and that they are for the purpose of scoping out our planet, as they might want to call it home one day. This certainly is one of those things that you have to draw your own conclusions from, and while it's good to remain skeptical, it's also imperative that we keep our minds open, because who are we to say for sure? In our number 1 spot today, we have the 2021 UFO. On February 21st of 2021, a blogger was using a radio scanner to try and pick up the feed from an aircraft when he received much more than he ever expected. He intercepted the transmission of the wrong aircraft, but at the right time. As an American Airlines flight was headed from Cincinnati to Phoenix around 1:19 p.m., the pilot came on the radio to ask the question, "Do you have any targets up here? We just had something go right over top of us." After this, he followed up with, "I hate to say this, but it looked like a long cylindrical object that almost looked like a cruise missile type of thing moving really fast right over the top of us." Not only were FAA air traffic controllers not able to see any object in the area on their radar scope, but they still have been unable to identify exactly what it could have been. This does happen more often than any of us really know, and it is possible that the object could have been a part of some covert military or Navy operation, but it certainly raises some alarm alarm bells that it was unable to be tracked in any sort of capacity. I wonder if this is one of those stories that will remain a mystery, or if one day we'll maybe get some sort of answers as to what exactly happened.
Well, we gotta start off with what everyone kinda hopes to be the case. Aliens. Either aliens that pose a threat to our safety that we want to stay away from, or aliens that the government wants to cover up. One theory is that during Apollo missions, astronauts encountered extraterrestrial beings or evidence of their existence on the moon. And if that is true, it's pretty awesome for one, but would also have some pretty serious implications for humanity. Implications that NASA and the government may have figured we just weren't ready for yet. Some believe that governments and space agencies have deliberately kept this information from the public to avoid widespread panic. They may have also found advanced technology on the moon they didn't want falling into the wrong hands. There have been testimonies from former astronauts hinting at unexplained encounters, and that's not even mentioning all the supposed whistleblower accounts about secretive government operations with extraterrestrials here on Earth. So the fear of exposing such a big secret may be one reason why astronauts haven't returned to the moon in such a long time. If we really do end up returning in 2026 though, maybe some secrets will finally be revealed, but sadly, I doubt it. So speaking of the possibility of strange structures on the moon and possible alien encounters, enter Scott Waring. Scott Waring, an enthusiast in all things extraterrestrial, has posted tons of videos and images of things he's spotted in images and videos, including stuff on the moon. He's posted tons of videos on YouTube where he zooms in on lunar craters, pointing out strange shapes that he insists don't fit the bill as just natural rock formations. He thinks they look like structures or even spacecraft. One of his finds is a curious formation in the Zeeman crater on the far side of the moon. It looks to be a rectangular type of shape, almost too perfect to be anything but artificial, according to him anyway. Waring and other conspiracy theorists have speculated that it could be an entrance to an underground alien base. It kind of see looks like steps there, right? Waring also alleges that some of these structures he's identified mysteriously vanish from future scans of Google Moon, making him think things are being covered up. Either the images are getting scrubbed from Google, or the objects are mobile in some way and are just flying away or like closing up. But are these just cases of the human brain perceiving familiar patterns or shapes where none actually exist? I gotta say, in most of these cases, I think so. I do believe there are aliens out there. I also think there's a high probability they've interacted with us, but I'm not too sure they have bases set up on the moon. But what do you guys think? Let's talk more about mysterious objects and structures on the moon. Anyway though, maybe you'll be convinced. Could astronauts have come across alien structures or artifacts on the moon in previous missions? Remnants of some ancient civilization or evidence of extraterrestrial activity up there? There have been other anomalies captured in photographs from the Apollo missions. Unusual shapes and formations that look to be artificial rather than natural. Again, if stuff like this was found, governments and space agencies might be hesitant about returning to the moon out of fear of what they might find. Uncovering evidence of past or present extraterrestrial civilizations could be dangerous. We may just not want to poke the bear until we're ready to deal with it, which is why we haven't had a plan in motion to return until now. One example of odd structures on the moon is this image here, which was taken on an Apollo mission. Formation is often referred to as the castle. This is probably the image that got most people thinking about possible alien structures on the moon. It does kind of look like three pillars or columns holding up what looks to be a tower. And what's intriguing is that this structure looks brighter than its surroundings. So again, what do you think? Is this just a trick of the light, or could it be something more? Here's a weird one. So anyone a fan here of mystery goo? Feel like that's something you want to mess with? No? Well, apparently there's some on the moon. China's U2 rover, part of the Chang'e 4 mission, made a strange discovery on the far side of the moon. It was a weird jelly-like substance This strange material was found inside a small crater called von Karman, and it looked different from the usual dusty lunar soil surrounding it. The rover stumbled on it when it was busy exploring the moon's surface using its visible and near-infrared spectrometer, or VNIS. And we're not entirely sure what this stuff is. Scientists have thrown around a few ideas, of course. Some think it could be glass that melted when a space rock crashed into the moon, but it could also be alien spit. I'll just say alien spit. I want to go further with that, but you know. The U-2 rover started poking around on the moon in 2019, collecting data on the far side where astronauts have never set foot, and that just makes this discovery a lot more interesting. Another possibility about why we haven't gone back to the moon in such a long time is that astronauts could have encountered unforeseen hazards or some other type of phenomena during previous missions. Something that's not necessarily alien, just strange. Space is of course full of dangers, from radiation and microgravity to meteoroid impacts and solar storms. It's possible that Apollo astronauts encountered threats beyond what they were prepared for, and quite possibly beyond what they could even explain. So this one is a bit more esoteric, I know, but I'm just throwing some ideas out there. They may have seen something they just couldn't wrap their heads around. Horrifying, but beyond recognition, almost Lovecraftian. Something that made them never want to return. Of course, other than that though, there are the more well-documented dangers, like the harrowing experiences of Apollo 13, which narrowly avoided disaster after an oxygen tank explosion. There are also the long-term effects of space travel on human health, like radiation exposure and bone loss. If astronauts encountered unknown dangers or phenomena on the moon, space agencies would obviously be a lot more cautious going forward. So maybe they prioritized unmanned missions for that very reason. Here's a more cynical idea though. Maybe the moon holds strategic importance for military purposes. Maybe landing on the moon wasn't as much about humanity reaching the stars as it was about gaining control over a valuable piece of rock. I mean, the space race was happening during the Cold War, after all. The Soviets and the US were desperate to get up there. Could there be covert operations that have been going on the moon? Could the moon be in the process of militarization? Advancements in technology have made space-based weapons and surveillance capabilities very feasible. If governments have indeed set up military installations on the moon or are planning to do so, the implications would be huge. And because of how sensitive military operations are and the potential for geopolitical tension, governments may be reluctant to publicly come forward and disclose their activities up there on the moon, not wanting to reveal any classified information. Probably the most likely explanation for me though is this one: money. The allure of returning to the moon is of course undeniable, but I mean, it all comes down to what's practical in the end, right? Funding is one of the main challenges for space exploration in general. There have been advances in space technology, but the cost and complexity of lunar exploration are still big obstacles, particularly for cash-strapped space agencies facing competing priorities and budgetary constraints. Developing the necessary spacecraft, habitats, the propulsion systems for long lunar missions requires a lot of investment and innovation. The long-term sustainability of, say, a lunar base is a big obstacle, because I mean, why go back to the moon if all we're gonna do is look around again? The goal is always to take things another step forward, and at this point it would be establishing an actual base up there, and politics come into play. I'll get more into politics in a minute, but political priorities shift and the public's interest in moon missions can also influence government's funding for space exploration. In recent years, there has been a growing awareness as well of the potential impact of human activities on the moon and even Mars. Scientists and policymakers are getting more concerned about the risk of contaminating the lunar environment with all of Earth's little microbes or disrupting delicate ecosystems that may exist up there. There's no doubt that if we keep going the direction we are, that one day we'll colonize the moon and Mars, but we need to develop protocols and regulations to try and minimize the risk of biological contamination. If we don't, there could be big problems. Politics, they get in the way of everything. As more countries get involved in space exploration, working together becomes even more important. But tensions between countries and different national interests can make forming partnerships tough. Issues like who owns the technology, how resources are shared, and how information is exchanged can all cause problems, especially among countries with their own space plans. To make moon missions successful and space exploration in general more successful, countries need to get along, conflicts will need to be avoided, and we have to put aside our petty squabbles and finally come together as one unified force, because, I mean, the deeper we get into space, who knows what we're gonna find. But last on the list, we have moondust, aka lunar regolith, which covers the moon's surface like a fine, powdery blanket. Dust doesn't sound very intimidating, but it can be, at least on the moon. Unlike the dust you find on stuff like that waffle maker, that person who barely knew you got you for a Secret Santa 4 years ago that you only used once, moon dust is a different form of dust. It's not even dust. These tiny, sharp grains of sand. It's formed over billions of years from meteoroid impacts, and because the moon lacks any weather erosion, it just stays jagged. So this lunar dust can be a bit of a problem. Anakin Skywalker would hate moon dust. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere. But it's more than just annoying and inconvenient. Moondust can mess up spacesuits, spacecraft, and machinery, potentially causing damage or malfunctions, and accidentally inhaling moondust would be very dangerous. Moondust can cause all sorts of respiratory issues.
Number 10, astronaut sightings. Who better to trust about what's going on in space than people who have actually been to space before? That's right, numerous astronauts over the years have reported seeing things that they think might be UFOs. Buzz Aldrin was one of the astronauts aboard the Apollo 11, and during their journey they all reported seeing flying objects. Of course, space debris exists, and it could just be some metal junk that was adrift in space. But then why did they report that the objects appeared to be following them? When they thought that it might have just been a detached part of the rocket that was flying alongside them, they were informed that this piece was actually 6,000 miles away from them, and they definitely wouldn't have been able to see it from that far away. He also said that when they brought it up, they were briefed to not talk about what they had seen out in space. Well, the government can try all they want to cover things up, but eventually word always gets out. Number 9, paintings. Now let's go well beyond spaceships and astronauts and move into the far more distant past, because alien sightings certainly aren't a new thing and seem to have been around for centuries. One piece of evidence that people often cite is a painting titled The Madonna with Saint Giovannino. It was painted in the 15th century by Dominic Ghirlandaio and appears to depict a UFO flying around in the background, its shape matching up with people's frequent depictions of flying saucers as being alien spacecrafts. There also appear to be beams of light coming out from the bottom of the ship, and this has led people to believe that it is unmistakably an alien craft and not just something else placed up in the sky. And if you take a look at it, it does seem hard to believe that it could be anything else, as what other dark object would make sense to be floating in the sky like that? If you have any ideas, let me know what else you think it might be. Number 8, the Tic Tac UFO. Back in 2004 on the coast of California, a US Navy pilot named David Fravor reported seeing something strange. In fact, he reported seeing something that was, quote, something not from this earth. They were about 60 to 100 miles off the coast of California, and he was leading a strike fighter squadron through some exercises when the incident occurred. He said that he saw a tic-tac shaped vessel flying through the air at incredible speeds, but it wasn't just him who saw it. It was also reported by another flight crew who actually followed after the craft and even filmed it. While the footage was originally kept classified, it's now been made available to the public. The case was then published by the New York Times after the Pentagon acknowledged its Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program, which is actually the Pentagon's own 21st century study of UFO sightings. Number 7, wow! Exclamation point. The Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, otherwise known as SETI, is a group that, well, searches for extraterrestrial intelligence. In 1977, a large radio telescope outside of Ohio was scanning the skies on behalf of SETI when they picked up a signal that lasted for 72 seconds. The
printouts of readings often included low numbers, which was typically just the background noise that the telescope picked up. But then a scientist noticed that there was a sudden string of letters as well as larger numbers. The letters went all the way up to U, which indicated a signal 30 times stronger than the typical background noise. Upon seeing these consecutive letters, which would represent a very strong signal and something potentially alien, he circled them and wrote the word "wow" followed by an exclamation point in bright red pen. To this day, we've never really seen anything else like it, and the extraordinary readout has yet to ever be duplicated. Number 6. Viking Mars. Now let's get into some more sciencey factual stuff. When people think of aliens, the term that might often come to mind is Martians, being attributed specifically to aliens that reside on the planet of Mars. NASA has sent a lot of things out there, and one expedition was referred to as Viking, them sending out little robots to take readings of the planet. One test that they performed was done on the soil, mixing soil with radioactive carbon-labeled nutrients to see if they would produce radioactive methane gas, this being a chemical sign of life on other planets. And it did, the test coming back with a positive result and finding organic molecules. But NASA just brushed it off, I guess, because they said that the other experiments didn't end up with the same results, so they just said it was a false positive. But one of the original scientists and others who have analyzed the data stand by their discovery, saying that the other experiments had just been ill-equipped for performing the tests and finding the same results. Number 5. Martian Fossil. Let's hear from NASA again, this event taking place in 1996 when they announced that they had found a Martian fossil. They said that they had found fossilized microbes within a lump of Martian rock, a meteorite that is theorized to have been blasted off the planet around 15 million years ago before finally winding up in Antarctica, where it was discovered 12 years prior in 1984. They analyzed it a lot, of course, and found organic molecules as well as small bits of the mineral known as magnetite, which can sometimes be found in Earth bacteria. Researchers also said that under an electron microscope they were able to see traces of nanobacteria. So it seems like evidence is continuing to stack up that other planets are, or used to be, capable of sustaining life. And with a universe as infinitely large as ours, it's hard to say that it's impossible that life on other planets could ever exist. Number 4. The Super Hornet. Let's now take a look at another piece of evidence that came out following the Pentagon's acknowledgement of their Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program. This took place back in 2015 on the East Coast and is another video of evidence discovered by the US Navy, this time by a FA-18 Super Hornet, a strike fighter that reaches speeds of up to 2,000 kilometers an hour. That's pretty fast. The pilots see the unidentified object moving at incredibly high speeds over the water and they struggle to keep up, but are finally able to get a lock on it. When they do, they start cheering, and one even says, "What the F is that thing?" They continue to follow it and seem to be unable to figure out what it possibly could be. This is another piece of evidence that had to go through a declassification process before it could be released to the public. Makes you wonder what other video footage and potential signs of alien life the government might be hiding from us in a filing cabinet labeled classified. Number 3. Chicago O'Hare. In November 2006 in Chicago, Illinois, airline staff and pilots alike were shocked by what they had witnessed. Multiple people reported seeing what they described as a flying saucer in the air. It was an overcast day and the UFO seemed to be just hovering over the Chicago O'Hare airport terminal. They then described how it seemed to shoot up into the air incredibly quickly, so fast that it punched a hole through the cloud cover above it. The FAA, or Federal Aviation Administration, described it as simply being a strange weather phenomenon and they wouldn't be investigating it, so don't worry about it. Of course, that's what they want us to think. But so many people at once reporting seeing a flying saucer shooting through the clouds doesn't really sound like a weather phenomenon to me. One flight traffic control official said, "To fly 7 million light years to O'Hare and then have to turn around and go home because your gate was occupied is simply unacceptable." Number 2. SETI readings. Now let's go back to the SETI project again. If you've somehow already forgotten by now, that refers to the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Back in 2003, they were using a large telescope in Puerto Rico to re-examine around 200 sections of the sky that had all previously shown unexplained radio signals. All of the signals had disappeared except for one, which had actually become stronger. It came from a spot between the constellations Pisces and Aries where there aren't any known stars or planets. The signal was emitting the frequency for hydrogen, the most common element which both absorbs and emits energy. Some astronomers believing that this is the most likely element aliens might use to send a message to us for this reason. The signal from this spot in space has now been recorded a total of 3 times, and has left many people wondering if it is truly a signal coming from aliens. Number 1. The Phoenix Lights. On March 13th in 1997, an event took place that was referred to as Lights over Phoenix, or the Phoenix Lights phenomenon. On this day, hundreds of witnesses reported seeing otherworldly lights across Arizona, Nevada, and northern Mexico. There were 2 main events. The first being a giant V-shaped aircraft that had 5 lights on it, maybe thrusters, though it apparently didn't make any sound. Then later that night, there were a series of red and orange lights in the sky that didn't appear to move at all. And while air traffic control employees could see the lights in the sky, they couldn't see them on their radars. The governor of the state of Arizona at the time said, "I'm a pilot and I know just about every machine that flies. It was bigger than anything I've ever seen. It remains a great mystery." And it really does remain a mystery. To this day, nobody seems to have any real or solid explanation for what the large spacecraft and the lights might have been. It was said that it was a military flare drop, but this came after their original statement that they had no planes in the air. And even a recreation of the event didn't line up with what people had seen, flares flickering and burning out after only a few seconds. I have an explanation though, it was aliens.
Create a video using exactly this script. Want to see more videos like this one? Check out this video next! It's about real-life families that are scarier than the Manson family. This video is about the creepiest families in the world and how creepy they are. Click the video now to find out more. You won't regret it.